Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. On the eve of the very first K-Defense Day, Korea has signed its largest ever individual defense export contract under the new administration, finalizing a deal to supply 180 K2 tanks to Poland, estimated at over $6.5 billion. Now, this marks the second stage of a broader strategic agreement that has already been seen Korean arms becoming a mainstay in Europe's shifting security landscape. Now, at the same time, Vaccaro, the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Defense Trade Controls, is in Seoul. He has delivered a keynote speech outlining the Trump administration's new defense export policy, just as he's set to begin close-door meetings with Korea's top defense contractors. Now, with eyes on Eastern Europe, Washington, and beyond, is South Korea's ambition to become a global top 4 defense power finally within reach? For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined in the studio by Mason Rishi, Professor of International Politics at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Welcome, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us online is Kim Mok-yeon, Professor of Seogang Business School. Good to see you, Professor.
Good evening.
So let's start with Professor Kim. The headline itself, the Hyundai Rotem has now officially finalized a second supply contract for K2 tanks to Poland. From a business perspective, how significant is this deal for Korea's defense industry and its global competitiveness?
Well, from Mr. Trump's term, that is a beautiful contract, right? As you mentioned, the Hyundai Rotem has officially finalized the second supply contract of K2 tank to Poland, which has been delayed for several months from last year. This order is a part of an umbrella contract made in 2022 between Korea and Poland that include the K2 tank, K9 self-propelled howitzer, FA-50 light attack aircraft, and Chunmoo multiple expansion rocket. According to the defense industry, the size of the second export contract is 180 units of K2 tanks, as in the first one, and the amount is about $6.5 billion US. This is the largest single defense export contract ever, and the first mammoth defense order since the inauguration of the Lee Jae-myung administration. This second export contract for K2 tank indicate that defense cooperation between Korea and Poland will continue. Moreover, this contract is a defense cooperation model that is consistent with the European rearmament plan announced in March this year by the European Union. Accordingly, this contract will be a new momentum for defense export of Korea, not only in individual countries in Europe, but also in NATO as a whole.
So that's definitely a massive number and one that really marks a turning point for Korea's global defense profile. Professor, building on this, we hear that this contract actually includes not just the standard K2GF tanks, but also the K2PL model tailored to Polish requirements. Why are these localized variants like these have such a competitive edge, and how valuable are the long-term MRO services tied to them?
Well, yeah, it is very important. In the second contract, the number of supplies is 180 units, just in the first contract, as you mentioned, but the amount has almost doubled due to the addition of local customized K2PL tanks to accommodate the Polish Army requirement and the cost of building local production bases. 117 of the second contract will be produced in Korea, and the remaining 63 will be made in Poland. With the development of K2PL, that is named the policy K2 tank, right? That's totally localized and local production. The scope of the business has expanded and the contract has grown, so the negotiation has been delayed, to date. When it comes to the establishment of a local production base, it will increase the possibility of implementing the follow-up contract for the remaining 1,000 K2 tanks included in the umbrella contract. It will also provide a strong competitive edge for Hyundai Rotem to enter into other countries in the European Union. In addition, it will provide the capability to maintain tanks in the region swiftly through MRO contract as a local company.
Right. So customization and long-term support could be just as important as the initial sale, too. Now, let's shift a little bit to the political side, Professor Rishi. So this deal was actually stalled for 3 years and even saw a shift in the government of Poland. How much do you think geopolitical factors like the war in Ukraine influenced this agreement over the line?
Yeah, so obviously we know that there's been a significant global demand or increase in global demand for all sorts of defense products, and that's been driven regionally by different factors. In Europe, obviously, the war in Ukraine, also the conflict in the Middle East, and of course the geostrategic competition between the US and China in East Asia, which has led to a sort of regional arms race where you have the US arming up, China obviously, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, also North Korea. So certainly the demand in this market has grown enormously, and along with that demand, of course, supply simply has trouble keeping up with it in the sort of traditional known quantity defense exporters from the US to Europe to Russia. So South Korea, in that sense, occupies a growing and important niche. So the geopolitics clearly matter. But in the second place, South Korea has some really particular competitive advantages. One of them obviously is speed, which translates into more or less on-time delivery. An excellent price-quality ratio. The technology in some cases for South Korea's defense products may not be the absolute top of the line, but it's pretty close for 80% of the price, let's say. Then you've got the tailored deals, which Professor Kim just talked about, which South Korea is capable of doing. Less of for instance, the U.S. model, which is often sort of take it or leave it. You do it the U.S. way, or the U.S. simply won't want to sell to you because of, for instance, the nature of the technology that's involved. And then again, the tech transfer and co-production side of the equation also makes South Korea really attractive, so that you're not just buying a product off the shelf, you're also investing in your own country's future ability, in some cases, to be able to produce these goods yourself over the long term.
Mm-hmm. So among the several advantages that you've mentioned, Professor Rishi, I want to expand a little bit on the speed at the time of delivery as one of the selling points of South Korea. For starters, could you explain for us how important is, delivery speed in today's defense diplomacy, especially, when rival models like Germany's Leopard and the U.S. Abrams face bottlenecks?
Yeah, speed obviously matters. And we see that because of the capacity constraints, as I mentioned, in Europe, where the defense industrial base, at the end of the Cold War, was powered down significantly, and the United States, increasingly took a share of the defense acquisition market share. The U.S., of course, has, however, its own bottlenecks currently, whether that be Abrams tanks, or whether that be missile defense systems, or whether that be drones or ships, or any number of goods. This is one of the things that the United States and the White House currently, and also the Biden administration, became increasingly concerned about, simply the bottlenecks and the ability of the U.S. defense industrial base to keep pace with all of the challenges that the United States is facing. And of course, that's really exacerbated by the geostrategic competition here in the Indo-Pacific, as I mentioned, and now, of course, the conflicts in Europe, which have, again, eaten into stocks and eaten into various munitions and platforms and systems, which, to some degree, puts the U.S. even more behind. So speed matters in filling these gaps in crises that are ongoing, such as what's happening in Europe. And obviously, that's part of the story, and it's an important one. But I think there are two other important factors, and one of them is simply reliability. It's not just speed, it's also the ability to deliver on time. You can actually be a little bit slower than a competitor. But the main thing is, are you going to get it done? So one of the things that we saw, just another different case, but nonetheless I think an important one. One of the reasons why Australia ended up joining AUKUS, the U.S., UK, Australia submarine deal, was because France was terribly behind and overcost on the submarines that it was going to sell to Australia. So Australia said, okay, we're going to cancel this contract and we're going to go with what we think is going to be a more reliable choice. That's actually not working out that way, but that's a separate story. So reliability is really important in delivery on time. And the second thing is the middle to long-term perspective as well. It's not just about getting the products out the door and to the customers as fast as possible. Notably, countries in Europe are also interested in these co-production and tech transfer agreements, and that's, again, as important as speed in some cases.
Right, so speed should be accompanied by reliability and trust, and also a long-term perspective would be very crucial in this situation. Now, let's move ahead. So many say this latest deal actually opens the door to more countries. Professor Kim, what other markets are showing interest in K-defense exports right now? And also, what specific strategies do you think Korean firms should pursue to, break into those regions?
Yeah, basically, it is an excellent timing for Korean defense industry to do business with like EU, Middle East countries, ASEAN countries, and like country like Indonesia, both firefighters and then all the kind of airplane things, and the European Union countries, try to buy our traditional kind of arsenals, right? And especially the U.S. president, asked the EU countries to increase their defense budget to 5%, which will be about 1 trillion euros. Also, the war between Ukraine and Russia gives another reason for European countries and also other countries like in the Middle East and ASEAN countries to increase their defense power. And however, due to the characteristics of the industry, localization is critical for any provider in the defense industry to make, successful business. I mean, local production, like, Professor Rich mentioned, local production and technology transfer are the most, critical part for the success. So the Korean companies need to make a roadmap toward the ending point, so that they can pursue or persuade the buyers. If the provider has the diversity in their offering, it will be more easily accepted. I mean, the economies of scope, right? So the Korean companies need to make a team, as we do now, when they go to foreign countries. Then they will get the scale and scope together.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's zoom out a little bit to the broader structure, Professor Rishi. South Korea's one-team model with unified coordination between the government and agencies and private firms is gaining attention. Could you explain for us how different this is from, traditional defense exporters, how they did operate before?
Sure. So, on paper, it may not be that different. I think really what's going to matter here is implementation. And we've seen, at the K-Defense Forum, the, Lee administration talk about setting up a control tower to sort of manage the strategy that South Korea is going to take as it tries to move into various markets. Every major defense exporter has a kind of a different way of doing things, but at the end of the day, they all want to put together something to the effect of a synergy between what the private sector can do in terms of innovation and filling the market with what the government has to do in some cases because there are legal constraints, but also can do in terms of the diplomacy. So on the part of the United States, United States defense exporters tend to be very tech heavy. Really aiming at top of the line products, which are frequently very expensive, in some cases quite, as we refer to them, exquisite. And that brings along with it generally a very significant regulatory burden. and a sort of sensitive legal framework that has to be worked through. The U.S. government also tends to press countries to buy from the U.S. just like any other country does. Europe, you have lots of regulations in the European Union context, in addition to what you're going to get from each state, whether it be France or Germany or the UK. We've heard the professor refer to the REARM program that's going to try to fix some of those problems, at the same time stocking up some of those expenditures. Russia is very government heavy. So in the case of South Korea, this integrated strategy, if it's actually worked out, I think could be a real bonus for South Korea's ability to make things streamlined for other customers.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've said it in the intro, but U.S. from America, Vaccaro, has given a keynote speech today where he emphasized cooperation with allies, and it was central to U.S. security. And he also tied Trump's recent executive orders on arms sales and the maritime industry as well. Professor, what do these shifts signal about Washington's direction in terms of defense export strategy?
Yeah, so just very briefly, the first thing I would say is, we have to understand what executive orders are. Executive orders are not laws, right? So the laws haven't changed. Executive orders are statements from the executive branch about how the executive branch and the various departments over which the White House oversees, through the cabinet secretaries, such as the Defense Department and the State Department, how they prioritize executing the laws that Congress has passed and how they interpret, in some cases, those laws. So we haven't seen any legal changes yet, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But the short version of the story is, all of the executive orders that came out in early April that were related to acquisition, procurement, foreign military sales, and that sort of thing, were in some sense all built around the notion of deregulation, of making it easier for U.S. defense contractors and indeed for the U.S. government itself to deal with customers. But if you go in and you look at the executive orders, the dates of implementation and the dates in which the various strategies for carrying out the aims of those executive orders were to come into play were 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. So for some of those things, we haven't actually seen what the strategy has been that has been worked out from, for instance, the State Department or from the Defense Department. So we'll have to see, I think, how that works. Just with respect to the maritime issue, since that's one that you brought up, we still, of course, haven't seen a change in either the naval shipbuilding laws or in the Jones Act, both of which make it essentially impossible for other countries to build U.S. merchant marine or naval ships or naval vessels outside of the United States and sell them to the United States for use in and by the United States. So until those laws change about where vessels can be constructed by allies, that's going to remain a real hurdle, I think. And then you have a problem of U.S. human capital and resource and technology constraints and bottlenecks. So there are opportunities for the U.S. for Korea in the U.S. market, but I think we're going to have to wait and see how those executive orders are going to be implemented and whether or not some legal changes are going to come along after that. Right.
So the opportunity is there, so we need to adapt quickly to that. Now, before we conclude our discussion, Professor Kim, you have touched upon, Korea's industrial and geopolitical momentum as we've been discussing. With the U.S. Defense Innovation Unit now stepping in and the line between civilian and military tech growing thinner, what do you think is South Korea's biggest opportunity and biggest challenge as well as it tries to position itself as a tech-driven defense powerhouse?
Well, Korea defense industry, just like other manufacturing industries, has a very strong capability in its production and delivery, just like, Professor Rich mentioned, reliability and delivery speed and like a preciseness. Even though the quality might not be, top level, but, price quality is very good. So, they know how to make something and they do not, have the experience in but they do not have experience in production in foreign countries. It is quite different from doing business in homeland and or export things to other countries. So they have to acquire the management capability to make things smooth when they go to foreign countries. And also the geopolitical conditions will affect the performance of the especially in defense industry. So they have to be very keen to the changes in the policies in the countries they are operating in, and also in the big powers like the U.S. Mike Vaccaro emphasized when Korean companies export defense the artilleries and arsenals, they have to really abide by the rule set by the U.S. So these are the key part they have to keep in mind.
So that really brings it to the full circle. If Korea wants to lead in not just in exports but in innovation, this could be a great moment to define what K-defense actually means in this current situation. Now we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Rishi and Professor Kim. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.